all feel threatened, not only physically and in sort of a normal security sense, but they feel by a loss of their national identities in Europe. I mean, we feel somewhat the same thing because of our border problems with Mexico, but it isn't as acute as it is,
right,
as it is in Europe. Look, I think that this is a place where he's proposing, he's confusing a kind of a moral principle that we do have to take care of the widow, the orphan, the stranger among us, with a political policy. The policy about how much immigration a country can accept is something that public officials are going to have to be able to determine. The current regimes in Italy, for example, say that they have 5 million poor people in Italy already, Italians that are poor people. And the Minister of the Interior, Salvini, for example,
right,
often says, well, what am I going to do? Am I going to admit another 1 million or 2 million or 5 million people?
Or take care of my own.
I have to take care of my own first. So there are multiple considerations here, and I don't really think it's a good thing for the Holy Father to confuse what is a gospel principle, taking care of the stranger among us, with some tough choices that have to be made in the policy.
Cardinal Robert Serra, I know you're reading his book. He is often mentioned as a possible candidate for the papacy. He made headlines this week decrying the use of the Bible to justify mass migration in a French interview. He said this: "It is better to help people flourish in their culture than to encourage them to come to Europe in full decadence. It is a false exegesis to use the Word of God to promote migration." Is Cardinal Serra correct here? Father Murray, very quickly.
Cardinal Serra is on the target here. The countries in Europe, the United States, and others, we should encourage countries in the third world to develop structures for economic development and political freedom so people don't feel the necessity to risk their lives to come to a place where they can earn their living. He also talks about the principle that people deserve a homeland and a culture, and it shouldn't be deprived of them. How often we see that in the case, particularly the third world, dictators loot the money, impoverish the people, and then, do nothing when people flee because it guarantees their power continues.
Robert,
one of the interesting things that came up during the Synod on Youth, and I was over there in Rome for that Synod, is, again, we tend to think of the immigration problem as the first world being invaded by poor people from elsewhere. One of the points that came up among other bishops is, in these poorer countries, what happens when your young people, the most dynamic dimension of your society, leave and go elsewhere? What about the future of those countries? And so I think the Holy Father actually mentioned this on the plane also, that the developed countries can perhaps aid development in these developing countries. That's another part of this question that really has to be addressed, because otherwise we're going to have utter disasters in the developing world, even worse than the ones we see right now.
I got to move on.